When you are building a team, it can feel like you just added more work to your plate initially in order to eventually have more work off of your plate. But it is so worth it. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This episode is actually inspired by a recent question that I had from one of my clients inside of MSA. And I had recently just demonstrated with the new Ask Heather AI bot that we have. We have 3 different bots inside of Ask Heather AI. One is for signature menu design. It has all of my frameworks built into it and all of my coaching built into it for building out your signature menu, for creating really irresistible descriptions and positioning for those menu items. The second bot is for consults. It has my CARES 5-figure consult frameworks built into it, and it has workflows built into it to help you and your team members actually ask questions, get feedback on recent consultations, get help with actually coming out with like sample scripts for consults. You know, I don't like scripts per se, but like frameworks for conversations that you and your team can have so that you can have a lot of clarity on their consultations. And then the third bot is built in with all of my magnetic marketing frameworks for the authority method. So it has all my email sequences built in, all my social media content, and what have you. And so I was demonstrating, actually not in the consult bot. At the time I was demonstrating, I was actually showing how to use the content bot for reworking and making more highly desire sparking and irresistible content within somebody's guide. So we, teach a method for really creating magnetic funnels to draw in folks on your social media, from your website and what have you. And so I recommend having a premium piece of content, multiple ones that actually thread and link back to your signature offers. And so in this circumstance, I was walking through voice to text with the authority method bot on helping it, because it has my guide framework built into it. Like, she's aware of what we're trying to do with the guide. And so I was voice to texting and having her help me recreate this. Now, I recently, by the time this episode aired, this training will be done, but I will link it up in the show notes, either a wait list for it or any information on Ask Heather AI, plus a recent training I did called Build an Unstoppable Brand. I actually went through how to create a magnetic brand that is totally designed for the incredible humans that you want to serve in your clinic or practice. And then I actually demonstrated, similarly to how I was helping this client actually make her guide more irresistible so that she can get more bookings of her premium patients and dreamy clients from this guide. Okay, so I'm showing this client this. In the meantime, I have another client who submits us a question after this. See, we have weekly calls, CEO calls, and she's asking, she's like, hey, I was so impressed with how conversational and real and genuine and just how incredible the output was for the Ask Heather AI results when I was demonstrating it. And she was like, it got her really thinking, because they have a few estheticians that are struggling with their consults. Okay. And so I wanted to dive in today about like what to do when you have team members that you want to really become like powerhouses when it comes to really not only selling more, but really installing like bigger, more comprehensive recommendations as well too. And so in this episode, we're going to dive into the different psychological principles that are going to help you and your team members to sell more and to sell more comprehensive things so that you can be more profitable, so that you can ultimately create more outstanding results as well. So this is the advice I gave to my client, and I'm going to expand upon it in case it will help you. So one of the reasons why I'm so bullish, or, there's a variety of reasons why, but the reason why I love having a signature menu where you take your clinical protocols and you create branded packages and programs and offers built on those clinical protocols that will create outstanding outcomes for a certain type of human. One reason why I love this is that it helps give your team members clarity on what should be recommended to whom and when. So this client already had that for her SDs. They already have a really awesome signature menu, and they already have some SDs that are selling packages well. Now, the next thing is having clarity on the consult, okay? Having clarity on what you want your team members to have as a framework for actually taking, from the intake all the way to the conversation that they have with their patient or client, okay? And so I'm gonna share it two ways. One, I'm going to share what I shared with her from an in-person standpoint. So what are the things you can actually do in your MedSpire practice to not only coach existing team members, but also onboard new team members so that they will successfully be able to sell more, but ultimately just really be able to make good, solid recommendations and get buy-in on those recommendations from the patients and clients, which is essentially selling more. But I know some of you like to think, you don't all like the word selling. Anyways, number one is modeling the behavior you want to see. There's a lot of research on behavior modeling and actually training folks to do certain tasks, providing certain experiences well. The first thing you want to think about is how can I behavior model for my team members? So in person, I really recommend, and this is from my corporate days, even from back my days when I was waiting tables in grad school, right? What did they do when they were first training? They taught me, right, how they want it to be done. So they actually had clarity on how they want the steps to be implemented, right? The next thing they did is they actually had me shadow somebody who was already doing it effectively. And this is something that a lead injector or a lead esthetician in your practice or clinic should be that's part of the point of having one of those lead roles, is that they are doing it. They are the prime example of how you want things done. And so from an in-person perspective, how can you make it so that your new folks, or maybe the folks that are struggling, can have an opportunity to actually shadow somebody who is going to showcase how you want the behavior done, AKA behavior modeling, right? This is also why I wanted there to be role playing in a workflow inside of the Ask Heather AI bot as well too, so that you could voice to text or even use the voice mode feature with her and actually have her walk a team member through different scenarios and then use our CARES process and show examples of how that team member could handle certain scenarios with certain patients and clients. So the second thing is built upon the first thing, and it is taking behavior modeling to the next level. And some of you may have even heard about this. It's the crawl, walk, run format. This is incremental confidence building, okay? And the idea behind the crawl, walk format, and this is not something I invented, this has been used for years in all different types of industries when they're training new hires. It's the idea that you teach, they watch, they do with supervision, and then they do it independently. Okay. And there's many different variations of this depending on the business. So you teach, they watch, they do with supervision, they do independently. So the example I gave with back in the day when I was waiting tables, and this is what I did when I was actually onboarding my replacement when I was going on maternity leave as well. So you actually want to have clarity on what steps, and this is actually, many of you are missing this, actually getting it down on paper. This is why I like a signature menu. This is what you want recommended to whom and when. Here's the actual CARES process. This is how our adaptation of the CARES process of how we want you to walk a patient or client through a consultation conversation. This is actually telling them what you want them to do, right? Getting clarity for them, because you can't give feedback and criticism when you haven't even told them exactly how you want it to be. So you want to get this down. So you tell them what you want them to do, then you want to demonstrate. You want them to shadow somebody who is already implementing that system. So then they shadow that person, right? And then you want them to be the one shadowed. This is actually when I first got laser certified here in Arizona, this was what the requirement was at the time, at least where I went to get certified. I had to have a certain number of hours where I was observing other people, and then I had to have a certain number of hours where I was being observed. And then after that has all been done effectively, then they can go and implement themselves. And so I think one of the disconnects that happens after, let's say you've done this and you still have somebody who is struggling, one of the disconnects that happens is if you almost have to be like maniacal about onboarding. The more maniacal you get about onboarding, the more you are setting folks up for success. And so it does take a lot of effort in the beginning to show them how you want it done, right? Like telling them what you want them done, showing them how you want it done, then observing them doing it, and then having a cadence of checking in with that person more often, especially in the beginning. And then what happens is that you have these team members that go out, and with the ones that struggle, if you're only having weekly check-ins, or there's a lot of time disparity between from when they're having the conversations with the patient and client and when they're giving you their interpretation of those clients and patients. And so what I told my client was, because she was asking, how can we use the AI with these folks? And so I'm going to answer that. So 100%, one of the benefits of the AI is that you all cannot shadow your team members in perpetuity, right? You can't do it forever. It's not reasonable. But what happens is when that human goes out and has real conversations with patients and clients, things pop up. And in a busy med spa or practice, you oftentimes don't have time in between every single appointment to actually answer those questions. And so what I recommend for her is to actually show the team members that they can go in and use the AI because they can have it, the mobile version of it, and get feedback immediately. And the reason why I say immediately is the longer the time disparity happens between the conversation, the more there's going to be a drop off in the accuracy of the recall of what actually happened. This is why I'm so bullish on evaluating consultations right after they happen. But I am very aware of the fact that when you have a busy practice or med spa or clinic, and you have, client after client after client coming in, it can be less reasonable to like have an actual conversation with the practice manager or the spa manager or what have you. And so the AI can be used as that feedback in between. It still won't replace, though, having the real human actually come in and observe. And so what I told her, I told my client like how to use the AI, which I absolutely think that they should. But I also think for the folks who are really struggling, where their sales numbers, their package sales, their comprehensive solution sales, if you will, are way less than somebody else, I do think it can make sense to actually shadow that person and see what's going on. Because I have found that when I was training my new replacement for while I was going to be on maternity leave, and we had gotten busy enough to where we needed more than just me at the time as well too, as me and then the doctor and then the patient coordinator. There was just 3 of us. And so we knew we had grown quickly. And so it was due for us to start onboarding new team members anyhow, is that I told her how I wanted it done. Then I showed her by having her shadow me. And then I shadowed her, right? And I watched. And it took like really quickly, just by me observing her, I was able to give her constructive feedback in a way where she was telling me she was doing was likely going to be different than what she was actually doing. So sometimes it's just good old fashioned, like, hey, like, maybe it's you have to put in a regular cadence of actually shadowing team members so that you can see in person. Because depending on the team member and how our human brain works, we will not actually recall correctly what happened during the consultation. And what happens with team members who are really struggling is that they build a lot of stories, broad, general, vague stories about like, oh, well, it's summertime. Nobody wants to do X, Y, Z, or everybody doesn't like, it's too expensive for everybody. Like, raise your hand if you've ever had a team member who has told you some big grand sweeping statement, like everybody in your metropolitan area thinks this is too expensive. And it's just not true. It's the story they have about it. And that's why when we're coaching and training team members, we want to actually uncover what problem we're solving for. And we can't do that when we are just trying to coach them from the story that they're telling us. And so that's why shadowing can help. Also, having the coaching and the feedback be very, very tightly, from a time perspective, happen close to when the conversations are happening. That's why when I say being maniacal about onboarding, you might actually, those first 30, 60, 90 days, the cadence of feedback has to be super, super high. Meaning, like, you might need to have daily check-ins after their conversations. This is after you've already done the crawl, walk, run, whatever your version of that is going to be. The more you pour in to your team members in this way, the more you will build a powerhouse team for yourself. But the other thing you'll do is you'll build that skill set of being able to coach as well. And having the AI is also helpful. But I always you know how I am. I want to give you guys the honest rub. Like, what you are doing in person, the AI is going to help complement so that we can support your team members in between. But it's not hands off. You guys will still need to roll up your sleeves and really find out what's going on with team members so that you can help them. And what I found with coaching folks over the years and training in the many different capacities that I've had in my professional career, if you will, is that the more you can create safety for the person that you're training, the more they will be apt and receptive to that. And so how do we create safety? Well, one is really being clear. Like I've already said, we really want to get clarity on what the expectations are. Two is not creating whatever the onboarding is, whatever the ongoing training is. If the person knows that you're not just creating this or doing this because of XYZ, oh, you're sucking right now, so we have to roll up our sleeves and do a lot of things that aren't part of the standard operating procedure of how you train people, then that can make them feel like they're being pulled out. Now, there's times where it's just hey, this is just business. You're struggling here. We want to support you. That's not what I'm talking about. You can still do that. But the more it becomes standard operating procedure that you have shadow days for your team members, that you have the crawl, walk, run as part of your natural training process, the more that becomes normal, the more your team members will just understand that that is the standard operating procedure for how you guys do things. And yeah, so it's called psychological safety with training, and people perform better when they trust that they're not being judged in a punitive way. There is a difference between safe, constructive feedback and punitive, a-holery boss, you're in a bad mood and you're just being super critical. And if you're listening to this podcast, none of you are this way. Most of you have the opposite problem where you're not giving enough feedback because you're too concerned about doing it wrong. And what I have to say is that the more you get clarity, the more you make it like, this is just how we do things, the more you get it down on paper, the more your team won't feel like this is just how things are, right? This is just part of working here, right? Because it becomes just a normal part of working here. Ultimately, you are trying to instill habit formation and then instill consistent feedback loops for your folks. And this does not have to be, like I said, obviously it's not going to be realistic like after every conversation a team member has. But when you're thinking about your onboarding, the volume of feedback loops needs to be higher. And then you might throughout a year want there to be certain moments where somebody shadows, right? Where you're shadowing a team member or they're shadowing you, right? Where there's an ability to get the information of what's actually happening during those conversations. And then actually having your team members get in the habit of evaluating themselves. And that's the thing that the AI is so helpful for, is that they can pop in and ask her a question on an objection that they got. And she's going to give them based on my feedback and because she's fed with like hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours of coaching from me, of coaching team members and coaching CEOs and owners as well too. She's going to give you feedback on how to actually handle it. So it's helpful. So I think it's a two-part system. It's like, what are you going to do in person? And then how can you use a sales trainer AI like the Ask Heather AI consult bot? So that's what I have for you. Like, such great question. And I know that it can feel like when you are building a team, it can feel like you just added more work to your plate initially in order to eventually have more work off of your plate. But it is so worth it. When you intentionally create the foundational structure to equip your team members to really succeed, and then as your team members are, as you're coaching them and you are developing them over their time with you, it is going to build that culture of having a place where you have that growth structure and mindset actually built into what it is that you do. And so the more you get better, like building these frameworks for your teams, the more you will become a practice or clinic that can just scale simpler and easier and more effectively, because, it's oftentimes your people are your biggest liability, but they're also your biggest asset as well. So that's what I have for you this week. If you're interested in learning more about Ask Heather AI, I will link up some information in the show notes. I'll see you next week.